You might think hardened criminals are undeserving of second chances. But Nhut Vo is convinced that people can change. He's an example. He came to the US from Vietnam at 9. In his early teens, he joined a gang. At 16, he was involved in a double murder. A few years later, he was arrested and sentenced to hard time, life without parole. But Nyat says he transformed in prison. He took educational courses, he became an artist, and he also learned compassion. That same man who was sentenced to life without parole is now 4 months out of prison. He says it was the kindness of others that ultimately freed him. This is Nhut Vo's Rebound.
That must have been a hard nut to hear at 19. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't really know how to receive that at that time. I, I felt like, to be honest with you, talking to you today is almost kind of like a dream to me. And so it's almost like a person dreaming, and then you wake up and then you're looking back at your dream, and you get to see from a whole different perspective. So when you're in a dream, you are so engaged in it that you don't get to see certain things as clearly. For me, when I look back at it, I felt like my whole life I was trying to find an identity. I was essentially a very selfish person. Uh, I was an insecure kid that's sick for attention, so I gravitate toward the gang lifestyle. And so when I was sentenced to life without possibility of parole, that really it really hard for me to define myself at that time, because I felt like it's hard to say, but I felt like you don't have any value as a human being, because when you're giving a life without possibility of parole, it's essentially saying that you have no worth, you are irredeemable. Uh, I mean, that sentence is kind of like saying that you will eventually die in prison. Uh, and so I was crushed when that happened. And the way I dealt with it was I just keep negative behavior. I do things for instant gratification. I didn't look far into the future, because they, at that time in my life, I felt like there's no future for me.
Did you ever think you would get out of prison?
No. uh, I think for the first part of my incarceration, I mean, my sentence tell me that I'm not going to get out of prison. I was not sentenced to a life term. If you were a lifer, then you have a possibility to attend a parole board hearing and earn your freedom. I was sentenced to life without a possibility of parole. So at the beginning, I I really didn't expect that I would have a chance to be out here, um, and I use that as an excuse, to just live my life wastefully, I think.
What does that mean? You're in prison and you felt like you lived your life wastefully.
Prison is actually, I think, it it's a matter of perspective. It can be a training ground for you to improve yourself, uh, or it could be a training ground for you to make yourself worse. It's an option that you can take, uh, and it takes a lot of resiliency, which I did not have. Uh,
Mm.
and that's something, like I say, I have a lot of self-limiting belief when I was a child that I didn't know about. I lived on a lot of assumption. Uh, there was a lot of fear, me having a lot of insecurity issue, language barrier, physical appearance, all those things that, children, I think, struggle with, especially for me coming from a whole different culture to American culture. So there was a challenge of me, for me to adapt and adjust. Uh, so in prison, for the most part, I didn't I didn't try to improve myself. I didn't try to be a better person. I felt I had a lot of resentment. I felt that just, that's how the card is dealt, and I'm just going to live it the best way I can. Uh, and that's a very selfish way
Mm.
of looking at it.
But you spent 20 years in prison.
Yes.
You're out now.
Yes.
Clearly, somehow behind those prison walls, you were able to build resiliency. How did you do it, Nyut?
Um, I think with a lot of compassion from other people. I think if I look back in my life, it's always been there. There are a lot of people. I have a lot of kindness in my life. I just choose not to see them, from my family to all those people around me. But for the most part, is because I think around 2007, there's a group called the Human Rights Watch. And so there's this lady named Elizabeth Calvin, and she is the person that one of the main advocate for challenging and abolishing the life without possibility sentence for juvenile. And that was the time where the Supreme Court are actually looking at that case. Uh, and so she reached out to me and she gave me a glimmer of hope. She told me that people out here care about you. That that you have some words. There's more to it than this. And I think that's what kind of helped me a little bit. That pushed me. And then after that, I just started to embrace these type of kindness that come my way from the Innocent Project, which pick up my case, and uh, and just sponsor and all these other programs like the Positive Change Program, Defy Venture, Alternative to Violence. There's so many programs that they have offered, and yeah, and I took advantage of them, and gradually I started to build a new sense of, I guess, identity as self. That I think I have always had, but I never really looked deep enough to find.
How do you think it is that you were able to finally be released from prison?
I think because I changed. I think I changed, and I was able to demonstrate that. Um, it's a very difficult process, I think, when you go to a parole board in prison. I mean, the for the first 16 years of my life in prison, I didn't expect to go to a board, so there's no incentive for me to try to be better, to do anything. Uh, but in 2015, I was resentenced, and they take off my life without possibility of parole, and they actually give me a lifetime. And when they gave me that lifetime, it reduces my custody level. So I was able to move from a high security prison to a low security prison. From that point on, I start to demonstrate that I'm capable of being a responsible and a contributing citizen. That I have value to offer to society if I'm giving that opportunity to return, and I demonstrate that within that short period. And essentially, I just felt like I'm so remote from the person that I used to be.
Mm.
I think that show, and I think that's partly why I was able to earn my freedom.
What surprised you the most about prison?
That there's a lot of good people in there. I think there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of good people. I think you really see humanity when you are living in a state of despair and suffering. You will see other people. I mean, there are bad things. There's a lot of bad things that are going on in there, but there's also good things that's overlooked, I think. And I think that's very important that we need to see from both sides. There's a lot of people in there that work really hard to want to regain the trust of society. They want to return to society and they want to contribute. And
I can
yeah,
tell it's so emotional for you as you talk about your fellow inmates. Why is it so emotional?
um, I think it's just the idea of me being out here, you know. So I feel like you build you build a really strong bond in there. Just imagine if they're going to put you in a 8 by 12 feet cell with a person. Eventually, you're gonna build a type of bond that I think is even stronger than a family type of bond because we I think relationship is built. You might have blood brother and sister, and that's just by blood. But if you don't see them for 20 years, they're almost stranger to you, other than the fact that there's blood, that you guys share the same blood. But if you spend time with individual in there, and they share their hope, their dream with you, their pain, and if you open yourself up to that, it's very hard to overlook, to not consider them, to not want them to. I guess to alleviate their suffering somehow, to help them out if you're capable of. I somehow I feel I'm placed in a position where I'm able to help, even just talking to you. I hope talking to you might change some perspective about prisoner. And in that way, it might help. It might give other people in there a chance to get out too.
You know, Yet there's some people who believed criminals, particularly felons, convicted felons, they can never be reformed. They can never, their life will never change. The longer you spend, especially decades and decades, these people shouldn't be voting. These people shouldn't have access to the outside world because their crime was just so heinous. What do you say to those people?
You know what I say? I learned, I'll share about my perspective, how I see it. I learned that as human beings, we are very eager to punish when we see someone do something wrong that is not right, that's not according to our belief. We want to punish them. And I think the hardest thing to do is to forgive and have compassion for them. And what worked for me is when I actually learned that I need to forgive and have compassion for myself. Because the worst punishment I have done is to myself. And when I'm able to have that inner peace and I forgive myself, it's so easy to forgive other people. Really easy to forgive other people. And when you forgive them, you show them compassion, it transforms them. It actually transforms them. The same criminal that you see rob a liquor store or do something illegal can be a very loving father. There's compassion in everybody. If you are able to see at that person as a good person, and you show them compassion, give them a chance to change, give them opportunity to change. I think that's the best way to approach it. Then again, you don't condone their negative behavior, but you don't, you don't define them by that behavior, and just it's a lot easier when you give people chances. I think it helps them change better than to judge them, because when you judge somebody, chances are they're going to believe your judgment on them, and chances are they'll be that person.
And yet, what does it do to you when you're in prison and you're able to draw like that? What happens mentally?
I think it's free you mentally. I learned, like, in practice, the best way is to be mindful of the present moment. And I have some Buddhist background, and that's what I learned, and that's what I practice. And painting and drawing for me is able to anchor me in the present moment. And that's very important for me, because if I don't have that type of mental anchor, I will dwell on the past. There's a lot of things I did that I'm regretful of. There are a lot of people I have harmed because of my selfish way. And then if you look at the future for that time in my life, there's really nothing. Present is the safest thing, and it gives you a lot of sense of peace. So painting does that for me.
You've managed to turn it around. You've come out of some dark moments of your life to actually emerge back into society with a totally changed heart. What would you say was your moment of rebounding, of coming out of that darkness?
there's a lot of compassion around you. There's a lot of kindness around you. You just need to receive it. Sometimes if it's not around you, then you need to receive your own compassion. You need to be kind to yourself. And I think that I finally what really is was the rebound for me is I learned how to be kind toward myself, and that enabled me to receive kindness from other people. And that really changed my perspective in life.
Before you go, Nyet, is there a message or anything that's weighing on your heart right now? What would you like to tell people about your life?
I hope that we can be more kind to each other, especially those who make mistake, terrible mistake. And I think those people are the kind of people that they will prove themselves to you if you give them that opportunity. If you give them a chance to change, they will change. And maybe you have to give them more than once. But I think a lot of time is, I just feel it's important that we should be more kind to each other. And that really changed the world, I think. So.